Short-term therapy doesn't have to be just a band-aid. We can teach clients to be their own therapist. So let's listen to Richard as he talks about how he gives homework and how that even led to one client recovering before they met. Team is both short-term therapy and practical. This doesn't mean it's a band-aid approach. In fact, we want to teach clients to be their own therapists, and sometimes that requires failing. We want them to have a safe place to fail. So let's listen to Richard as he talks about how powerful homework and other tools can be, and in fact, how one of his clients recovered even before they met. Welcome back to another episode of Talking Team. Today we have Richard Lamb. I'm really excited. Richard is part of FGI, and he does a Wednesday group with Rhonda. He's a team level 5 CBT trainer and certification program manager at FGI as well. So welcome, Richard.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
Right. Well, the first question I kind of want to ask you is, how did you get into team? It's kind of what we start with everyone.
Oh, that's an interesting one. So I was actually in grad school, and Maura Katz, the director of the Feeling Good Institute, was supposed to teach cognitive behavioral therapy class. And I remember even right before our class, my cohort were talking about CBT, like, oh, it's so unempathetic. We don't want to do this. We don't want to learn this. So it was met with a lot of criticism even before he came. And I was like, I don't know what CBT is, but okay, whatever you guys say. I remember learning it. I'm like, oh, I love this stuff. And I was like eating it up, and everyone was not so interested. They already had their preconceived criticisms. And I remember after that, I was wanting more, and I went up to more at the end, and it was, I think everyone was like looking at me like, what is he doing? And I was like, hey, can I like learn more about this stuff? And he's like, oh yeah, here's some resources. And then that kind of started off my journey a little bit here, where I started taking many team training groups, including Matt Mays and Angela Crumbs, and it was just so wonderful and so helpful. And then I started my internship at Feeling Good Institute, and from there I just stuck with Feeling Good Institute ever since.
Awesome. Yeah, CBT is so cold has definitely run the gamut. We've heard that from a few people.
Yeah, that's for sure. Such a strange thing to think about when because like with Team CBT, the empathy is like built into it. So it's just so wonderful and so helpful.
Yeah, well, we know you're a master of empathy, and it's just so great to have you on with us, Richard. Richard's, I'm sure true for you, Angela, but I know for me, he's been one of my primary teachers of team over the years, and learned so much from you. So it's great to have you on, and I'd love to hear a little bit from you. If you could tell us, like, I know you've primarily really, your journey is kind of interesting as far as, you're as a clinician, and I can say you pretty much really operate under the team umbrella, but tell us, like, why that's been so powerful for you in terms of, like, how you operate and do counseling.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The only thing, I'm like a pure Team CBT person. I never really learned different other like modalities or models of therapy. And it's interesting because I kind of hear a lot of people say they have to unlearn certain things in order to do this because they get into the mentality of helping. But I just kind of get into the mentality of just like listening and hearing them and then offering help. And I think that's just the beauty of it all too, where it feels like the most respectful kind of therapy, where you're not forcing help onto someone. You're just waiting until they're feeling ready and we're feeling really comfortable to kind of get to the next steps and asking for your help. And I think that's just like the most collaborative thing you can do, which is why I love it so much. I'm not sure if I answered your question there. I just went on a huge rant.
Yeah. Yeah. And remind me also, I thought also even before becoming a clinician, you'd done some different things, right? Before you found yourself in this arena.
Yeah, it was interesting. I actually started as like a salesperson, and that was a very interesting experience. A lot of good communication skills. And the crazy thing is I I was learning team while doing it too. So I was working quite a bit while going to school, and I was learning the 5 secrets of effective communication. And I was like, it's okay if they don't buy. I was kind of like in that mindset. And then as soon as I got into that mindset and used the communication skills, suddenly I started getting even more sales. It was so crazy. It's like this way of like doing therapy just applies everywhere. It's insane.
It's so true, because we've already had on two uh, we've had life coaches, but specifically personal trainers, so like that kind of blew my
Yeah.
mind too. And I started doing these interviews and like didn't expect to be having personal trainers on. But yeah, it helps them in their work too. I love that you said that empathy piece and some of the other aspects of team is this respect. And it's not that I would ever accuse other practitioners of not having respect, but there's a deeper level to it when you can just honor clients wherever they're at and just be okay with what their decisions. I think that's really awesome. I know that could be really challenging. That's a really challenging aspect of team for me. Is there any challenging aspects that you've found in team?
Yeah, I think once in a while I see this person really struggling and I have like tremendous empathy for them. And I really do want to help. So my mind's like, I can't help yet. I have to kind of go through this process and kind of understand a little bit more. Because I don't think anyone wants help when they don't think you understand just yet. And sometimes especially early on in my career, I remember I would make that mistake of trying to help, and then my empathy scores would be so bad, and our relationship wouldn't be as great. And then that's kind of like when I learned the most, like the more I failed. So I remember like one of my mentors in the beginning, I believe it was Matt May or Angela Crum, telling me that you just got to just fail fast and you'll get better. So that was my mentality going forward. I'm like, I'm just gonna get better by failing. And it's been so helpful for me ever since. Not that I don't make any mistakes. I still continue to make many, many mistakes.
Yeah. How was that for you to hear that? Like, oh, well, fail.
It was really painful for me. I had to do a lot of my own personal work around failure and accepting failure. It was very challenging, especially kind of receiving my first survey from my patients, and it wasn't like perfect scores. I'm like, oh, I usually get really good scores in schools. And I was like, this doesn't feel great.
Straight A student.
So that was challenging for me, but overall, so helpful. Good mindset to adapt.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe, Angela, I'm so curious to tell maybe about the other end, Richard, some of the, high speed results that can result from someone like you who's skillfully using, Team CBT. And I don't know if you have specific examples or just give us a sense of how that. I know your clients often do multiple DMLs, daily mood logs, and working on that. But I don't know if you have a good example of how that's impacted your practice.
Yeah, a big part of it is I'm a strong believer in short-term therapy. I don't expect them to kind of stay with me for the rest of their life. So I really want to teach them to be their own therapist. So that way they don't need my help anymore. And when I kind of think about, I'm like thinking about one person in particular, it was just like so amazing. He was so motivated, so ready to do therapy. And he reached out to me because he's read all David's books, and he's like, yeah, I read it, but it doesn't work, right? Believe in it. And I was like, oh, so I kind of addressed a little bit of his process resistance, because he would like tell me like he's reading it, but he doesn't really like do the exercises. And I let him know, hey, you really got to do this work. And in order to do it, by doing it, you'll kind of feel so much better if you have to do the work that I tell you to do. And at that point, he like everything clicked for him. He's like, oh, I'll do it. And I was like, okay. And then I see him a week later, and he's like, I've been doing 8 hours of work every day, and I feel so much better. I actually don't need this session anymore. And thank you for your time. I just wanted to come to session to tell you that. I'm like, oh my God, you like recovered even at our first session. That's amazing. And I think that's kind of like one of the most rewarding things for me, where people kind of go out there, um they just do their own work and they feel so much better and they don't need my help anymore, or maybe even at all, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's like Angela, Richard is so effective here with his gentle ultimatums, right? He can cure them before they get to the first session. So, but it's incredible that the power and the work that you're doing, especially someone like you who can really understand the approach and really kind of like stick with it. That's what I think we've always kind of like learned from you regarding that. I have one question, then I'll let you jump in, Angela. But and it's almost like for both of you, since you're Angela, just like you, Richard is someone who's really used a lot of technology, embraced it, and always answered David's questions whenever he had questions, just like you do. I'm curious how that's like kind of impacted your ability to deliver a team.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I think in the beginning it was a little bit challenging. I was just so used to in person, face to face. And then after, like with the whole COVID pandemic, we were forced to be more on video, and it really had me like thinking a little bit more on using different like spreadsheets, using like the iPad or sharing the iPad screen, and it's been really effective. In fact, I do my own personal work every month just to get some refreshers, or even when I'm feeling really distressed, it's helpful. And all of mine has been converted to like Excel sheets because I tend to lose my paperwork or can't read my handwriting. So it's very useful and helpful for me to use technology.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't, like, my handwriting is like chicken scratch. So I'm with you. Typing is a lot better.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit. I mean, you oversee the certification and the training program. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about like how this Team CBT could really impact students and their ability to deliver effective therapy.
Yeah, I really like the certification program. It creates quite a bit of structure to kind of guide you through each process, the learning process, where level one is you have a certain amount of knowledge about Team CBT. When you're in level two, you learn a little bit more about different strategies and you start implementing a little bit of it. And then level three is when it gets a little bit more serious, where in order to become level three, there's like this oral exam that the two of you have done yourself and of course, passed with flying colors. And part of this is it really puts you in a position to really test your skills to be qualified. And it also helps our patients know like what kind of training you've gone through and in terms of the different levels. And then level four is really interesting one. Level four is when you start becoming a trainer. And I think when you start teaching things, you start learning quite a bit more too. I can imagine the two of you kind of notice that as well, where you start knowing the things that you don't know that you didn't know. and then you start learning quite a bit, and it's just so tremendous. And then level five is the mastery level where you've done training for quite a bit and you learn quite a bit more. Of course, there's always more to learn. So I don't expect this to be like the final kind of thing. You just continue to foster your skills and learn things as you go, because as you know, the world is always growing. There's always new things to learn.
Yeah. And you were actually my examiner when I did.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Which I didn't think about until you said that. Yeah,
I'm
for
sure
sure.
you're great, Angela.
Yeah. Is there any aspect of like team where you found there's something more to it that you'd like to explore that you haven't really had a chance to yet? Like, is there something out there, or is like you were talking about how, oh, well, you're level 5 and you haven't arrived and you said there's still more things to do. Is there a process or kind of a direction that you're going in to learn new things?
Yeah, I think there's something very interesting about the dynamic between relationships. And I like one thing that I've talked about before is the different types of I feel statements and how it can impact a person in terms of blame, right? You can say, I feel upset because you are late, or I feel upset because we decided to meet at this time and now it's this time. Or you can say, I feel really upset and anxious because I have a hard time sitting here by myself and I was creating all these stories in my mind about what could have happened to you, which is the last thing I would want because you mean so much to me. And all these give the same message, but it's quite different in terms of how people receive it. And I think there's so much more that we can do in terms of communication and the words that we choose that can deliver exactly how we feel without hurting the other person. But of course, there's a balance too, right? Where part of this is we're not too sure like which ways we can use communication to impact the other person. But I also worry the more we look into this, it can also become a little more manipulative unless we really cling on to the idea of being genuine and not trying to change the other person. So there's a lot of intention behind it as well, where if your intention is just trying to understand more and learn and put yourself out into the world to help other people understand you more, then I think it's going to be so beneficial for everyone. But I think there's a lot of growth that can happen within the relationship side of therapy. But just something to think about a little more.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. The idea of growth by changing how I relate to other people and making sure that I'm staying genuine. Because again, if I'm going to stay genuine, we have to do that personal work, which you've already talked about. That if you don't have that, if you're not willing to do the personal work, it's going to be pretty hard to be genuine because, you know, unless you're just already an amazing person, which I guess lots of people are, but that's not me. I have a lot of flaws.
Same here.
Yep, same here too. But that was some good use of the 5 secrets also that Richard demonstrated there. Not just some I feel statements, but also, you know, some stroking and some other of this 5 secrets pulled in there. And that's such a powerful approach, both within our own professional work as well as our personal lives as well.
For sure, for sure. Well, we're out of time. And what's the last question we always ask is, what's one thing that you'd like every therapist in the world to know about TEAM?
Yeah, I think TEAM is just such a practical approach where if you really want to learn something, you really want to grow, you really have to practice so much and fail so much in order to do that. And I think TEAM kind of puts you in a place where you can do that. Not only do you fail a lot in order to succeed and become a better therapist, but it also allows your patients to fail in a really safe environment in order to succeed. And I think that's just something that everyone needs in this world. In order to improve in anything, you have to try, fail in order to succeed. So that's how I kind of view things when it comes to the TEAM model.
Yeah, there's so much in failure. Well, thank you so much for being here, Richard. We really appreciated your time. And just before we go real quick, I want to let people know you've started a new YouTube series, and they can go to the Feeling Good Institute for that. This will probably come out, you know, you'll probably have a few more out there than you do right now. I know you only have one, but probably by the time people see this video, you'll have more out there. Just tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, so doing this part on YouTube, on the Feeling Good Institute YouTube channel. We're going to call this series The Feeling Good Therapist. And I'll be interviewing quite a few therapists in order for them to teach us different therapy techniques. So it can be really helpful for a lot of therapists out there to learn and grow their skills in terms of different methods. But not only that, but if even the general public kind of looks at it, it could be really helpful for them, especially if they're like, oh, this is so helpful, and they kind of change their thoughts, and maybe they don't even have to see us, which would be so wonderful. They just kind of help themselves. I hope is that it can be just very beneficial for the entire world.
Yeah.
Another potential homework assignment for our clients to tune in and watch those.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. All right. Thank you so much, Richard.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for